Alright, so now that we have covered most of the basics of using After Effects, you're ready to see some cool new plugins and things for After Effects. So plugins are things that extend the functionality of After Effects, and I'm going to show you one specific one that's super awesome that helps with animating characters, as well as a few other little features that make animation a lot easier. So that plugin is called DUIK. You can download it at this link, and it's for Mac and Windows, and it is free. So a lot of plugins are not free. This one is completely free and is absolutely amazing for character animation. Not just human characters, but also animals, as well as all sorts of other little custom things. So if you download this at this link, and just download it over here, you'll get a zip file. In that zip file will be a help file which gives you instructions on how to install DUIK. Basically, the best way is to copy the files from the script.ui panels folder in the zip to, in Windows, your After Effects installation folder. On mine it was Adobe After Effects CC 2020, support files, script UI panels. You copy that file in there. If you're on Mac, you copy it into Applications, After Effects, script UI panels. And then there are some optional things that you can install. You don't need to install those. They just give you more windows that you can pop around your After Effects install. You can also drag that same file, so it will be DUIK bassel.2.jsx with the Alt or the Option key plus Shift into the project panel of your After Effects. As you see in here, it says on the first run, it will ask you for the language. The default is Esperanto, so if you want to have it in English or something else, just check that when you start up. So the help file you get when you have that zip file will give you this installation instruction, as well as a few other tips and stuff, and basically it will give you details on all these different features that it has, because there's definitely no way that I can cover all these things in just a short class. So definitely check that out, there, as well as there are a lot of useful tutorials you can find online. Some that I would specifically recommend, there is a YouTube channel called Tuks in Motion. He's got two wonderful tutorials on DUIK. He's got one called the DUIK Jumpstart. He actually also provides some files, as well as I do, similar sort of stuff. But what's really useful is his second tutorial, which is how to use the head rig system, or how to create a head rig system, which you can use sliders as well as other things provided in DUIK to animate a character talking. That's a way more advanced use of DUIK. Today we're just going to focus on character animation. So like this character, which I have included the files in the description for you. One of the files is this actually animated, and then the other is just an empty file where we can start working with. So as I say, when you open up DUIK, you'll get the first run, it will ask for language. If you don't have a DUIK window open, go to your window panel and click on DUIK bassel.2. So that's the version. Bassel is the version. I'm doing it with DUIK 16.216. I still have an older version of this. You might have a few less features. If you're doing this in the future, some things might have changed by then. But at the moment, this is the latest version, 16.2.16. And what we have in here is my little penguin man character. As you may have seen, I've got, so you might have seen that I have a merch store with things available. This character is available on my merch store for my streams. And it's a wonderful way to support me, because this was one of the first characters I created for my personal brand. I just like penguins. I don't know if you've seen my meat mat thing. There's a video of that. And yeah, let's get into it. So if you have not seen my tutorial on how to import things, definitely check that video out. I'll have a link available to that in the top. Definitely check out how to import files first. But I do have the version already set up. But if you want to create your own characters, definitely check that out because it's important to know how to lay out your files correctly. So if you open up the DUIK base file in the zip folder that I include in the description, that will give you just a blank file with this character and all its layers laid out. There's the link to my Twitch channel and the merch store if you're interested. So in this, we have got a character with layers for all the different bits: feet, legs, upper, lower legs, as well as the body. And we've got 2 wings, the head and the eye. So in fact, I'm going to lock the color layers so it doesn't cause us trouble. And yeah, let's begin. If you remember the importing lesson, we want to make sure that your files are imported with crop to layer size set on, so that each layer is just selected around a certain region. So when you open up DUIK, so remember under the window, DUIK.bassel, just one thing I would say is just check your settings in DUIK. I've just dragged mine into this little corner over here, and I have set mine to standard mode. It just gives you a few more options. If you click on that, it gives you other modes. Expert and God mode just don't have writing or as much writing in them. Rookie has less options available. So I just use standard. And once you do that, just say apply. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to start off working in the rigging tab. So you'll have a bunch of different buttons over here. I want to go to the rigging tab. So rigging is a system for animation for setting up sort of like skeletons and control structures for your characters. So we want to start off by going to Create Structures. In the Create Structures tab under rigging, we get a bunch of different options over here, and one of them is hominoid. So basically a human or a human-like thing, a character with a head, 2 arms, a body, and 2 legs. That's basically hominoid in this case. You can also create structures for just arms, legs, spine, tails, or you can create your own custom ones. So let's just click on the Create Hominoid button, and After Effects will do a bunch of stuff. And you'll get a whole bunch of different layers. I have reorganized my windows and panels over here just so we can see all these layers because it can get quite complicated. So we get a bunch of these different layers, and they're all parented in specific orders so that we can have an arm and leg and stuff that all connect in different ways. So we've got a left arm and a left leg, and they're all parented in different ways. And then we have the body and spine and head and neck. So what you would need to do is, once you've got these structures added, you want to rearrange them so that they match up with how your character looks. So by that I mean you want your shoulder to be with your shoulder, your elbow to be where your elbow goes, hips and thighs and knees and toes and all that. Just be aware that you want to grab the root of these structures. So like the arm, you want to get the shoulder. Otherwise, if you start doing it in the wrong order and you move like your hand to one place and then you move your elbow, you're going to move all the other bits in the wrong order. So you want to start and move your shoulder to match where the character's shoulder goes. And then you want to move the elbow to where the elbow will bend. In mine, it's not a really defined structure, but your own characters might have, really defined elbows and knees and things like that. So I'm just going to go and do all these things and put them in place. So you'll see that the structures for DUIK also contain systems for toes and things like that. This character has just got solid feet. I haven't set up anything for the toes, but you can have different separate objects for toes and things like that, so you can get a more natural walking looking thing for your character. So just, you can put these to line up where you sort of think the toes would go. Okay, so once you have placed these where they seem like they would bend correctly. Okay, so these are the structures that control the motion of the character. So what you want to do now is parent your art to the appropriate things. So I'm going to start with just the legs, and then I'm going to show you something else. Just check the naming. In my case, I have named the things on our right to be his left. That would be his left thigh, but we're seeing it on the right. In the case of these structures, that would be thigh 2. So just check those things, and then just use the pick whip and parent your things to the appropriate objects. Just make sure that you select the correct ones, and that's fine for 2. There you go. Carve 2. Carve. So now if we pick up the legs or the lower legs, they should all move with the correct ones. If you've done it the wrong way, you might pick up the left leg and the right leg will move. So it's good to just check that you have them parented correctly. So that's how you would do a basic object where you have, like in this case, where your legs are separate objects that each want to bend at a different point. But what you can do is you can also use DUIK with the puppet tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add pins onto things like the wings and the body. And with that, we can actually use these structures to control the puppet tool. So I'm just going to select these different layers. So I'm going to select the wing, and I'm going to go into the puppet tool. You can check out the class on the puppet tool in the links. So I'm just going to add a pin to each of these points so they match up where those structures will bend. You can do more or less pins as well. And you can also mess with things like the starch tool, so you can stiffen up areas and things like that. So once you've got the pins on an object, I would advise you to go into the puppet tool, under the mesh, under deform, find each one of your pins, and then rename them so that they're appropriate to what the specific point is. So like this one, if I press enter, I can type in shoulder R, because that's his right shoulder. This would be his elbow, right. This would be his wrist, right. And this would be his hand, right. That's just so I know which one it is, because later on we'll need these names so we can know which things will get parented to what. So I'm going to do that same thing with the right wing, or his left wing, just adding points at these locations. So for the head and body, I'm actually also going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a pin for the top of the head. I might actually add one on the end of the beak, and then one on the bottom of the head and the bottom of the neck. So this way we can get some nice bending on the head. For the body, I'm going to add one for the neck. I'm actually going to try this slightly differently from the first one that I created. I'm going to create pins on the shoulders, on the hips, and then for each of these things. So the pelvis, the spine, the chest, things like that. You can have more or less points if you want. So I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to rename them as well as on the head. So just check if you don't know which one you're renaming. When you select one of them, the pin will get highlighted. So this will be spine. You might not need to actually have this many. I'm just doing it now so we can get a lot more control. Okay, so once you've got all the things that you want pins on, you could go and add pins to the feet as well. Maybe I'll do that so we can get some foot motion. Let's try this. I haven't tried this before. Let's try it on the feet. So we can add a pin for the ankle, a pin for where the toes bend, and a pin for the top of the toes. We can rename these tip, toe, right. Okay, so once you've got all your pins added, you must then select all of these pins. So just open up the properties, and you can do this with multiple ones. So you can just go and click and select and drag them across all the different ones where you have pins that you want to do this with. So once you've got all those selected, then you must go to the Links and Constraints tab under Rigging, because in there we have a thing for adding bones. So bones are basically control objects for these pins. So if we do that with these selected, DUIK will do some calculations and add some objects, and after a little bit of a while we'll get little pins. So now when we pick up one of these pins, it's, well, bones. They basically control the pins of the puppet tool. So it's really nice because you don't have to go into each of the objects with the puppet tool and do stuff. You can control these like this. So what we must do then is we can close all these layers out just so that things take up less space, because now we don't need to look at those puppet things. Now we can lock all our art layers. So these are the Photoshop layers. We can lock them because we don't want to actually modify them anymore. We've added all the things we're going to change. But if you wanted, you can change your art now because they're not going to be directly controlled. You can change these art objects and the rig will still exist. So you can modify your files, bring in different character bits, add different pants and things if you want, and stuff like that. So I'm just going to lock these, and then I'm also going to turn on shy so that these no longer show up in the layer list, just because we've got so many layers at this point. Okay, so we have now got these bones. All we need to do is parent them the same way we did with the art layers, because now these will control the things instead of the parenting. So we want to do toes with toe 2 with toe left and toe R with toe, and all these other things, and up the hands and the body. Okay, so once you have assigned parents to all of these bones and these structures, you can lock them and shy them, because we no longer need to look at these anymore. So once that's all done and we've structures, we just want to see, we want to hide the bones and the art layers, because now we just want to use these structures to control the animation. What you can do is you can either select them all manually, just see all the structures, and then you can also, under the Create Structures tab, you can also say Select Structures, and we'll select all your structures. You can also show and hide them, which is a nice feature. And once they're all selected, we can do Auto Rig and IK. So this will automatically rig, so that is set up like a control structure. And IK is a system of mathematics for like bending the elbows and knees to follow a natural motion with the feet and things like that. So I'll show you now. We just need to click this button and it will do its magic and set all this up. So once this is done, we'll get a whole bunch of new layers. These will be called control layers. So you see they've got a little C on them and they've got little icons. I'm just going to quickly hide the bones, because I forgot to hide those, because we don't need to see the bones either. So now we just have the controls visible, and these are really powerful because they can control the entire character's animation just with these. I'm also going to shy because we don't need to see those now either, and I'm going to lock them so we don't accidentally move them around. So if I now grab one of these controls, like the hand control, I think I have attached the wrong shoulder to this arm. Yeah, I've messed the shoulders up. Give me a second. So we want to get the bone for the body shoulder. So let's just check these. So that is parented to, we must do it to arm and arm 2. That's better. So now if you play with these controllers, you can animate the entire flow of the character's arm just by moving one object and not having to bend and play with all the different pins. You can just move one thing around. Really powerful and fun and easy to use. I'm just going to put these back into place. You might find that if you're using a different character, your arms might bend in the wrong way. So say you wanted to bend the arm and the elbow was bending, you just select your controller, and in the effect controls under IK hand, you can just say reverse, and then the arm will bend in the other direction. And you can also animate that property so you can have the arm bend in a different direction at a different time. The same thing with the legs. If I grab the foot controller and move that around, your knee might bend in the wrong direction. So you can do the same thing and reverse the knee if you want to do that. Or say you've got a flamingo or something that with backwards knees or something like that. One thing you might notice is that I think this one, the layers are in the wrong order. You definitely want to check that your layers overlap in the correct way. So in this case, the lower leg is in the wrong order. I think we want the left leg to go over the right leg in this. So we're just going to rearrange the art layers over here. So let's just find the lower leg left and the lower foot left, and we're going to select those and just put them above the other leg, above the entire right leg over there. So now they're in the right order. So if we put this leg back in place, we're not going to get weird overlaps. You can also control the pelvis, and then the entire character will sort of bend and move to fit the pelvis. You can also animate things like the spine, so you can bend the chest around if you want to move them around like that. Already this is very powerful and very usable. You can animate your entire character with these points. What I need to do is I also need to parent the eye to the head control, I believe. What is the eye? The eye is not parented to anything. So let's just parent the eye to the head structure. So now the eye should move with the head. That was a little bit of an oversight. And if we rotate the head, the whole head and neck sort of thing will rotate with it. If we rotate the up spine area, since I added pins for the shoulders as well, they're staying in place with the arms. So we can rotate the hips. Very cool. So one thing that you'll notice if you press position on these controllers, you'll see that they've got a whole lot of positions and stuff. A useful thing to do is under the links and constraints, if you select all your controllers, there's an option here called 0. And what this will do is it will create some things to allow all these values over here to be 0. So the nice thing about that is if I do that, so let me turn this on with all these controllers selected, now they all have a 0 value. So now you can animate your character around, move their arms and things around, do some stuff, and then you want the character to reset back to their default position. You can just go and animate these points back to 0, which is very convenient and easy to work with. So you don't have to manually position them properly. So this is already super powerful. You can animate your characters like this. One of the super cool things that DUIK does is it provides you with automation tools. So those are things that will do specific animations or things like that for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the controllers, and then I'm going to go to the automations tab. So that's next to the reading tab. And in here, we can click on a thing called walk cycle. So we have all the controllers selected, and we click on walk cycle. It'll do some stuff in the background. And now it creates a new controller called walk cycle. So I can move this just so we can see it separately. This one doesn't move anything around with it. It's just a controller for everything else. And if I play back the animation without changing anything, DUIK is already animating our character. And it's not perfect, but it definitely looks like he's walking. And it's super powerful. It's super cool. A lot easier than doing it manually, but you definitely would want to tweak things to make it feel perfect. He doesn't look like he's really walking. He's sort of limping at the moment. You can hand tweak some of these things, but this is really powerful. So there's a little bit weird of thing with the hip over there. We might want to actually have a bone that pins that to the hip, and that's a minor detail. Then we've got the legs bending, the arms moving, even the head is shaking as the character moves. And there are a lot of settings under the walk cycle controller over here. The main one is a thing called general motion. So if I turn that down to 0, the character stops walking. If I make that a lower value, we've got a very sort of stilted, slow sort of walk that appears. And if we exaggerate this, like go 200%, then we get a really sort of flamboyant, high energy, over exaggerated walk, which can be cool as well. I kind of like it. So let's just go back to 100, and we can look at some of the other settings. So under main parameters, under character, you can adjust things that sort of control the overall feel of the character. At the moment, they're a 180 centimeter tall character, and this controls things like the stride length and things. So if I make them some weird 3 meter tall person, then the stride length will be very different, and you'll see the animation feels different. If I make them a really short person, let's make them 60 centimeters tall, now their little legs will have to go faster to do the same amount of walking. Another thing that's really completely changes the look is the weight. So if I make this person 200 kilograms, the way they move will be a bit different as well. I'm not exactly sure what it changes, but it does look different. And if we make them really light on their feet, let's make them a 30 kilogram character. And then again, the animation changes. Now the real fun bit comes in if we change this setting over here called energy. So if we make the walk more energetic, you can have some really fun results. Okay, we've got a little bit of funny stuff happening with the feet, but we can tweak that. But I really love how the arms swing and the whole body just feels like joyous in a way. It's wonderful. And you can also exaggerate that with a thing called softness, which will just sort of exaggerate the soft swinginess of the motion. So he's all sort of dancing and swinging around, and just it looks completely insane, but I love it. So let's fix those feet. So what we can do is we can go to secondary controls, find feet, and let's reduce foot rotation. There's still a little bit of weirdness. We can change the hit ground thing. I think it is also because I have pins on them, but the feet are also parented. So let's take the parenting of the feet off, because I was not intending to do this at the start. So I'm going to take foot parent off, and that should somewhat fix that. So you see, because we added those pins to the feet, we've got a little bit of toe bending as the feet move backwards in their walk cycle. So there's a bit of stuff you might want to tweak. I see that the knee is bending in the wrong spot over here. So this is a nice thing about using these control structures and stuff. If we see something like that, let's just go to a bit where it looks wrong. We can find the leg. So we can find the leg lower, I think it's this one, the right, and we can move it and adjust it. And the animation is unaffected, but just this leg gets moved. And now if we play back, animation still exists the same. Okay, the knee bends in the wrong place again, but it still works. It's still cool. And I just love the way that head is bobbing about. I feel like he should have headphones on as listening to some music as he walks around. So we've got some weird sort of jerkiness in the knee. So maybe we want to increase the stride length, or we can also change the something like the foot height. So how high the feet lift. So there we can over-exaggerate it, or we can lower down the foot lift. Maybe we want that a little bit higher. So it's really customizable of all these different settings. You can just change the walk cycle. It's still not perfect for this character, but it definitely works. I just love it. It's so silly. So I'm just going to change the softness and energy down a little bit. Maybe increase the stride length over here. I don't like the way that knee bends, but we can fix that later. So there are all sorts of controls. Let's change the body swing. We can change the up and down motion, so he can bob up and down more as he does stuff. We can change the hip swing, so how the hips rotate as the character walks. You can change how much the arms will swing. Honestly, I quite like the arms. Softness, if I change the softness, they'll noodly arms and swing around as they do stuff. So I think the hips are maybe a little bit strong. And you can also control the head and neck. So you can make the neck jiggle about, and you can change the softness of that as well. So under the walk cycle settings, you can change the speed. So if we make this a faster number, the character starts to sort of run, sort of skulking about actually. Or if you make this either positive or negative, depending on the orientation of your character, they'll start walking backwards. So mine's facing the left, but your characters you create might face the other direction. Just check these values. And you can animate these, of course, so you can make the character. That's how you would animate changing the speed. And another thing you can do is you can animate the general motion, so you can set that to 0 to stop them from walking. Another fun thing is under walk cycle type, you can change that to dancing, and then it just changes the way the character moves again, so they get more spring in their step and they swing around a little bit, and they'll just feel a little more energetic. And I just love this. You can also hide your controllers now if you don't want to look at them, see more of the motion, and change things. So I'm going to make this maybe a little bit less energetic. Maybe go back to realistic. So it's super powerful, super fun. You can completely change a lot of things. Another thing that you can do is, say you want your character to be using this walk cycle, but then you want them to start like doing something else, like wave or pick up something. What you can do is you can pick up your controller for something. So let's go with this right hand. And you'll see that there is a keyframe here for IK enable or disable. At the moment it's disabled because we're using the walk cycle. So you can turn this on and off with a keyframe here. And then you can use them walking, and then you can turn on the IK. So that is the controller for doing it yourself. So you can pick up the hand and maybe make them hold something or whatever. And then since it's using this IK system, if we play this back, they'll try keep their hand facing that thing. So we've got a keyframe in there, so we just need to open up this thing and So this is with a hold keyframe at the moment. We want to enable it, and now we can play back, and the character will sort of keep their hand on something. If we would just bring it a little bit closer to the body to make it feel a bit more natural. Maybe they're walking with a mug of coffee or something like that. And if you rotate it, we can just get their hand feeling a little bit more natural, like they actually got something in their hand. So you can do that with the feet as well. And yeah, it's really powerful. I love this tool. You can also do a whole lot of additional settings for each of these controllers for the arms, the legs, the heads and stuff. So definitely have a look at those, check out things and change things. Super powerful tool. I love this. So I'm going to show you some of the additional things that you can do. And one of them, just to finish off this animation, is I'm going to go to the eye and I'm going to add a blink animation to it. So I'm just going to locking on this so we can start looking at the eye. And what we can do is we can add an effect here for blinking, and we can do that either with opacity or we can do it with scale. I'm going to do it with opacity, but you can do this with scale so that the eye sort of shrinks up and down as it blinks. I'm just going to do it with opacity because it's easy. And it's as simple as selecting one of these properties. You have to select a property and then click on blink. So that's under the automations tab, and it will add a function on this for blinking, and you can control things like how often you want it to be, and now we'll get a character who blinks. And it's really nice because then you can get just random blinking and your character will feel a lot more natural. And you don't have to use this for eye blinks, you can use it for other things to make an object flicker on and off and things like that. So I'm just going to create a new composition and show you some other things. Okay, so under the automations tab over here, there are a lot of cool little things to help you. So we've already looked at the walk cycle and the blink. If you remember the first lesson we did a bounce animation. So I'm going to create a new layer, solid layer, and recreate a bounce, but using just simple plain keyframes and not do anything special. So I'm going to go to position, add a keyframe where the thing is high, and add a keyframe back to the original place. So we've just got up and down. DUIK gives you a cool tool called Cleaner. It does multiple things. You can remove unnecessary keyframes, but under the automations tool, if you add it, it adds some cool animation basics like anticipation and follow through. So those are things, you know, where the basics of animation, where a thing will move backwards in anticipation of a motion and then go forwards, and follow through, a thing will move beyond where you tell it to. So we can control all sorts of different things in the cleaner settings over here. So let's just play this back. So now it's a little bit more interesting, but to make it even better, we can add, under follow through, we can turn on bounce. So now, if you watch this, we need a few more keyframes in here because this, a few more frames because it's a very short composition. So now you see we've got 3 keyframes, but it's doing anticipation, follow through, and then bounce at the end. And you can increase all these things and keyframe these different things, so we can turn off bounce until we get to the bit where we want to bounce. So we can turn off bounce, turn on bounce, and then so it won't have bounces before that point, and then will only bounce at the end. You can change things like how elastic it is, randomness, damping, all sorts of things. So completely change the follow through effect. So you see that went all, change the thing. So that's super bouncy. Other things you can turn on, different settings, and have fun with that. Super powerful tool to control your animation. It also has a system of things for if I just add another new solid, we can do a quick wiggle add thing over here. So if we select this, let's just add a keyframe for position, and it doesn't actually have it turned on. So you can animate this property and change these values. So now this will animate the wiggle, and you can also turn on, off, and animate these properties so your wiggle can turn on and off just by animating those. So it's a nice way to work with these sort of expressions that I taught you before, but without having to add the expressions manually. You'll just get these nice little controllers on here that you can then just animate like you would a effect. So it's really nice. One of the things I like is there is a, let me just add another solid over here. There's a cool thing for a wheel system. So this is a square wheel, but that'll be a bit weird. But if we do the wheel thing, now if we animate the position of this thing, it will rotate like a wheel. This may sound a little bit weird that it's so cool to me, but the thing is, it's actually quite hard to get the rotation rate of an object to match the speed of motion. So what this does is it just calculates the right size for this, and it will match the rotation to the speed of motion, which is really cool. So you can animate a car or something, and then as you start and stop motion, the wheels will match the motion of the vehicle, which is really cool. This makes your life a lot easier. There are also things for spring objects, and so you can do springs and all sorts of other things. I would highly advise you to go into the help file that comes with DUIK and mess around with looking at all the different options and settings in there. Yeah, so I think that's all I'm going to show you with DUIK. It's really cool for doing the animated walk cycles and then animating your characters, making it easier so you can bend and do their limbs and stuff like that. And I hope you enjoy it. It's really makes life easier. I only showed it to you as the last lesson because you kind of need to know how to use After Effects before you use it. I definitely, if you're going to do character animation or you just want to use those helper things, I advise you to use it, make your life easier. The less work you have to do, the easier animation gets. Yeah, I hope you have sort of learned how to use After Effects now. We've covered a lot of different things with the basics all the way to fairly advanced stuff now. And as I said, I will be doing animation projects on my Twitch channel and stuff like that. More things will pop up on my YouTube channel if you want to check them out. All right, and good luck.